Welcome to Building Stories, the podcast where we tell honest and sometimes funny stories about construction and digital transformation. Very excited to have Chris Pynn with us today. He's worked at some really significant companies over the years, having roles as group technical directors and digital engineering leads. And currently, I believe, mate, you're leading the digital engineering on the Eastern Freeway Burke to Tram Alliance. A lot of experience. We're really happy to have you along.
Yep, no, good to be here, guys. Nice of you to ask for me to come and share some pearls of wisdom. Yeah, I've been around the tracks a little bit, 30 odd years in counting in terms of experience. Got a few scars and war stories to share.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. So your young years, mate, were there any hints that you would be a builder or a maker involved in this industry when you were growing up?
Probably not, no. The story of how I ended up doing what I'm doing is quite a funny one, but it was very much a by chance decision, or by chance opportunity really, than a decision point for me. I kind of followed the route of being a draftsman because that was seen to be that all the guys wanted to do at school, so I was like, well, seems like a reasonable one to follow. I originally wanted to be an architect, and then I found out I had to do 7 years at uni. I thought, no, that's not for me. So I went down the technical drawing route, and the irony was I was in the post office with a shop where I used to do the paper round, and I was sending off an advert for a job at a home builder. There used to be a home builder in the UK called Barrett's, I think it was, back in the day. And the guy that ran the shop, I obviously knew because I delivered newspapers, and I was talking to somebody in the shop as he did, and just got a conversation, and I said, I'm applying to Barrett. He thought I'd said Arab. And he said, oh, I know somebody that works there. And long story short, I ended up with an interview 6 months later and got a job as an apprentice at Arup in Manchester, having never heard of him before. So you never know what can happen in a newspaper shop. A bit of a journey from there, but that was 30 odd years ago in Manchester as a 16-year-old.
I guess you landed in Arup. What are some of the key moments that happen in those days?
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a journey. Spent 27 years with Arup. I was lucky enough to span the globe almost. Started off, obviously, as I said, in Manchester as a 16-year-old, reinforcement detailing and all that good stuff on a drawing board. People, for those who still remember those. And then I was lucky enough to get the chance to go to Singapore. So one Friday afternoon, these were back in the days where you could go to the pub on a Friday lunch and still come back to work and actually do your job more effectively than you had on the Friday morning. Got the opportunity. An email came around and said, anyone interested to go to Singapore for 4 months? Well, that seemed like a good idea at the time. 4 months turned into almost 12 years in Singapore, working on some of the best projects I've certainly ever worked on, and I had the pleasure and opportunity to work on. I guess the pinnacle of that being Marina Bay Sands, for those of you that have been in Singapore. Seems a long time ago now, 2006 was when we won, or when that job landed. We actually delivered that full thing in 3D back in, I wouldn't probably have called it BIM back then, but it was a full 3D structural model that we took straight to fabrication. That was some almost 20 years ago now. That was certainly a pinnacle in my career. Took a team of 6 people and built a team of 50 people to deliver that, transformed the way that office did work.
Awesome.
And obviously,
project.
It was a built, designed and built within 3 years, pretty much. So the scale and pace that's kind of unheard of over here. So, that was the pinnacle. But I did other projects there, like Singapore Sports Hub. Did numerous underground metro projects. Flyer, the big wheel, was probably one of the first ones that I worked on. So really sort of cut my teeth in terms of big project delivery over there. And also where I think my first introduction to BIM was back in 2002 in Singapore, which was a Singapore Building Construction Authority conference around an architectural automated checker based on IFCs back in 2002. So that was kind of my first time I ever heard the acronym Building Information Modeling. It was ironic that Autodesk killed that checker.
Yeah.
So I then moved into Australia. So I was lucky enough to take on a regional role, which meant I moved to Sydney and spent almost 3.5 years in Sydney. I ended up down in Melbourne, where I'm still here today. Then, yeah, I guess after 27 years, I thought I'd better take the stabilizers off and try something different. And so I went from as I saw it then, I went from the light to the dark side of the construction world, going Lango Roar. And now I sort of see it the other way, and I'm on the light side and look back on the design side as being the dark side.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Yeah.
I'm like your worst ex-smoker. When you apply that analogy to design and construction, it's quite funny.
Yeah. What was the lead that brought you into the construction side? You've spent a lot of time in the consulting side. You want to get your hands dirty, is that right?
Yeah, there's a bit of that. I think I'll be honest and say that my career at Arup was driven around two very core principles of what Arup was about back in those days, which was quality, not quantity, and it was about doing engineering properly. And I suppose I was starting to lose faith in what design and engineering was about. I don't know whether that was, it's like I left the UK in '99, so I can't really talk to what the UK market's like these days from a sort of personal perspective. It felt, as I sort of came into Australia, that the effort that went into design and engineering was certainly a slipping, I suppose, in terms of the quality part. I really wanted to get back into, like you say, getting your hands dirty and doing it, making sure what we did was of value and fit for purpose. And so, yeah, it was really around challenging myself to go back to what my core training was about, which was that quality aspect, and really putting your name to the flag, if you like, in terms of saying this is a constructible or buildable model, and this is where we can really sort of change and add value within the construction field.
Yeah, there's this commercial reality that really hits. It's the rubber hits the road when you're out in the field, and we've got to build this thing. And it's not just a engineering exercise. It's not just an algorithm or a mathematical formula that we've got to get right. We've got to build this, and that's really interesting.
Yeah, look, it's a challenging industry at the best of times. I guess I wrote a post on the Arup website back in 2013, which I talked about structural engineering become commoditized, and it probably didn't go down that well, being like what Arup were known for, I suppose, in terms of how they started out as a structural engineering company. I think that was very much the reality of the challenge within design and engineering predominantly. If you take the exception of maybe major infrastructure projects, where you've still kind of got that base level pricing mechanism, and there's kind of a comparison between what any one of your tier one designers cost to deliver a major piece of infrastructure. If you go into the building spectrum, as you guys all know, it's a dog eat dog world. And lowest price tends to trump or win the day, and that, I guess, ultimately always affects the quality. And I think the challenge for me was, I guess, being in that digital field and using or seeing that as an opportunity to do better and improve the way we deliver things. It was kind of going, opposite direction. Like on one hand, you're trying to use technology and tools to do things better, but you're constantly being forced to go the other way. So I think, the construction market has kind of flipped on its head and now embraces it, where for a long time it was, if I go back to 2010 when Arup, working with likes of Stuart Bull and John Ainsworth, we were trying to push BIM as a consultancy, and we're probably well ahead of our time in terms of what the market maturity was at. You wouldn't meet a contractor that was interested, they didn't see the benefit, whereas now it's probably flipped. Now it's the other way around, right? It's the contractors and the clients have finally got there, and it's a reasonably good place to play now. So it makes the selling part a lot easier. You don't have to spend as much time trying to push certain materials uphill like we have done over the years. And it's more a people want it and see the value of it. So there's still a long way to go. We've still got a lot of change to get to where we really could be as an industry, but certainly starting to see the green shoots appear.
Do you want to dig into that a little bit more? So the challenges of being an early adopter, like how does that actually play out? Is it you're having the same conversations over and over again? Is it like
Groundhog
just
Day.
coming up against personalities that you clash, or what's it?
Well, I think that's a bone of contention. I guess one of the challenges for me and people like me in these roles is you tend to kind of, you find that niche, or you end up in a place where you don't necessarily change, or you kind of, you're at the same level. That's certainly my experiences, and a lot of fluidity goes around you, so you're constantly having the same conversation, but it's with different people, right? So it might be different people on a project, or it's people that come through an organization like Arup and then they get promoted, and then you've got another wave that you've got to deal with. So the constant change piece, or the change piece, is constant. It's never, I've certainly not witnessed it any other way, that you're always battling that same challenge. There's either a new project or a new wave of people that you've still got to educate and bring to the party and get them to see the benefit. We're not blessed with a whole cohort that come out of university that are already skilled and ready to go, right? You get semblances of that these days with sort of computational design, but it's still pretty limited in my experience. So it is a case of, you feel like you're having the same conversations over time. That does, as people will know me, that does get quite frustrating. I've been pushing the use of IFC for the best part of 15 years, and everyone thought I was nuts back in the day, and some probably still do. But on BTA, we're delivering the whole thing using IFCs, and we've got a fully validated data structure using that format, and it works. And it's about, and I did it on Perth Stadium as well, back in 2013, where we went down that route against all of the infinite wisdom about you've got to do it in a certain way. It's about sticking to what you know in terms of, and what you trust to some degree. There's also positives from it in that you can look back. One of the things I was trying to push with Arup when I left was the changing and using Tekla for structures as opposed to Revit. It never made it across the line in building structures, but you see some of the work that the likes of John Legg are doing in Melbourne with the civil structural team, where he took the challenge up, and I sort of handed on the baton. Hadn't succeeded. He's made it a success, but you sort of look back and go, well, maybe there was some element of sense in that decision, right? So you don't always win, but you can still look back over time and go, well, actually, what you were trying to do, what the idea was right. It was just, it's either me and my skills of communicating, which is, somebody said to me yesterday in a meeting, maybe they don't understand you, Chris. That might be a part of it, but it's, people are at different levels of understanding as well, right? It's still quite a complicated conversation, and I think the assumption that you think everyone's on the same page is often the one we get wrong the most.
It's funny because the message hasn't changed a lot, but people are just now a bit more ready to hear it, or they understand it.
Yeah, I think so.
It's resonating.
Oh, exactly right. Yeah, no, it's definitely the appetite is definitely changed, and that can only be a positive. But you've still got the same challenges that there were 10 years ago. I think it's just the band or the breadth of the opportunity is probably broader than it was then, in the sense that you've got a much broader acceptance and acknowledgement that this is a value to the industry. Back
what was
50
it about
years ago,
IFC back in the day that drew you to it? Was it being agnostic to production software, or standardizing things, or what was it that you thought IFC is the future?
It was probably a bit of both. It was that taking it out of just being product driven and trying to keep things in a fashion where you could have a standardized approach to data. It was about, it might have been using things like that was specific to IFC, where you had Celebi back in the day that did things that other products didn't necessarily do. So there was maybe an element of that with it, but it was very much around trying to get consistency. I suppose I wouldn't profess to be an expert in it in any stretch compared to some people out there, but whilst it's not the most simplest of data structures or frameworks to get your head around, there is logic to it. And if you set it up and use it in the right way, it's actually pretty powerful. And I think the challenge was always, I always use the Revit export to IFC scenario where the expectation was somebody just hits the button and it just works, right? And it was never the case, right? You always had to invest some time in understanding what each product did and make sure that you were getting out of it what you wanted to do. Same thing now. Fast forward now, we've just been rolling out Trimble Quadri on BTA. Not really been used on a project in Australia before. I think Central may have tested it and gave up on it. Predominantly used all over Scandinavia for delivery of road projects, and it's been a challenge. It's been one of my colleagues, Emily, spent the best part of a year learning this thing from the ground up. We're even studying Norwegian because it's a Norwegian product, and a lot of even in the product itself, there's elements of it that are still in Norwegian. But it's frightening what you can do with it in terms of bringing any format of data in, structuring it in the way, validating it, restructuring it, re-exporting. I can take poorly structured IFCs and turn them into proper structured quality IFCs that can go into survey equipment. So it's, again, the software helps with that, but the knowledge of what's possible within the IFC framework is also the value piece. So I think it's...
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Short of anything else, I don't think there isn't really another way I'd ever see going forward that would make sense to me. So it's certainly something I've stuck to over the last...
It's a decision that leads to better collaboration and a better, lifetime use of the data, not locked away in some version of some software. So what's one piece of advice that you would give to someone who's interested in working in design, construction, consulting? What would you tell them?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess follow your passion, I suppose, would probably be the main thing. I've kind of taken a couple of routes where I've been lucky in terms of where I've ended up, but as I've said at the start, they weren't necessarily derived out of specific choice. I think it'd be about, I guess, first and foremost, trying to follow your passion of where you want to go. Be open-minded at the same time. It's a very broad industry. And again, I've kind of been lucky in the sense I've tried many elements of the industry. So started out in structures. I spent 5 years doing mechanical and electrical coordination on MRTs, which I'd never done before. I only realised I was doing it after I got off the plane in Singapore, and I presented the job, and I was like, okay, that wasn't what I got on the plane for, but we'll give it a go. They nearly sent me home after 2 weeks, but I picked it up. I got to the point where I was able to pretty much lead the team in coordinating MRTs, and that became a skill and a professional, a sought after skill for the next 10 years in Singapore that was kind of a go-to for, because it's a pretty bespoke part of that type of work. Yeah, I would have never planned for that, right? So being open to change as well, I think is you might not necessarily see a particular path for you. It doesn't mean that all different aspects of design and engineering aren't as interesting as the others. I think certain people will have a specific, I only want to do sustainability, or I want to do geotech or whatever. But I think you can get enjoyment from the same principles of engineering and design in many different facets, and it's the same as going from design to construction. It's a different challenge, but you're still able to get the same buzz from it, because you're applying a different lens. At the end of the day, you're still seeing work that projects that you're working on being delivered. I think that's the ultimate. buzz for anybody that's in the industry is being able to walk into a stadium or go to a train station or see something that you actually spent years working on. I still get a kick out of driving past Marina Bay Sands, even though it's 10 years old. It's still something you're proud of, and I think that's the most benefit. That's the biggest takeaway for me in terms of what we do as an industry and a profession.
I can hear a lot of that in everything you're saying, and the way you tackle, like digital engineering is same as structural engineering, same as configuring a team to do the right thing. You've got a problem, and we've got to come up with the solution. We need to engineer the solution out of it, whether it's connecting 3 massive buildings at the top with Marina Bay Sands, or holding up a roof. You've got a problem. We've got to get to the solution, and we just got to. That passion's going to enable us to get to the right solution.
Yeah, I certainly think that's, for me, what kind of drives me. I have a sort of driver that kind of gets me out of bed each day for work, which is, can I do what I did yesterday better than what I did yesterday? And that's not always the case, but it's certainly something that kind of, I think that's the other part of it, right? We've not perfected what we do either. So the opportunity to keep improving what we do is there as well. And it's kind of, I use an analogy because I obviously started out in the technical route, and then I studied engineering through college. I had the opportunity to go and do a university degree and become a fully fledged engineer. And I chose not to because I had a hot hatch that I wanted to keep, and I was going to the pub on a Friday night, and I thought, no, I'm not giving that all up for 2 years of extra university study. And I actually regret it now, but you don't, hindsight as a 19-year-old is probably not something that I was thinking that far forward, but it's that lost my train of thought there. But
what was it? The hot hatch? What was it?
Oh, it was a Rover Metro GTI 16 valve. But they weren't renowned for being the best cars, but they were actually pretty quick. Yeah,
what mistakes have you made, mate? I'm sure you haven't made many, but we've all made some. Any that you'd like to share for others, perhaps to learn from?
Oh, damn! That's, other than scheduling reinforcement wrong. That would have been the first one. So I used to have a running competition with my first boss around who could get the most red lines on a bar bending schedule. He used to, because when I joined Arup, there was effectively my boss, and I was the 16-year-old junior apprentice, and then everybody else was contracts. Back in the day, like contracting draftsmen, they'd earn £40,000 a year, which in 1990 was a reasonable sum. Probably still is. And there was me on £3,500 a year, managing these guys that were on £40,000 a year at one point. Well, we used to have this competition around, I'd check his drawings and he'd check mine before they went out of the door, and then it effectively went straight to site, and they started building from it. There was always that competition to see if you could get a red line on his drawing, on his bending schedules, and I had a few that were torn up and thrown in the bin. My first, you didn't learn, or you didn't do that too often. So that idea of, I guess, not doing something wrong, it was more the importance of doing it right. I think, again, it's something that's kind of been lost over time. I was scared stiff of doing something wrong when I was back at that age. The idea that you were going to get something wrong or do something that was not of the right quality was kind of unheard of. And maybe that was just the era, but I think that's something that we should still be trying to drive for. In terms of major mistakes, I don't know. I'd have to think on that one and get back to you. I'm sure I must have done, but can't think of any off the top of my head.
Well, just picking up.
The funniest one would be sending emails complaining about architects when you've CC'd the architect in. That's probably I won't name the companies or the projects, but I've done that a couple of times. So that's make sure you don't write the email at 8 o'clock at night when you're fully pumped. And
No one's complaining about architects.
No, we do. Everyone complains about architects, and likewise they complain about structural engineers. It's designers complain about contractors. It's all part of the territory.
So bring in some more of your engineering kind of mindset and your tinkering with problems. A question I've got for you. I'd really like to know what are you looking forward to tackling in the future? So if you're arriving at we haven't quite got there yet, and there's always a better way of doing a thing. You talked about the Norwegian software, but what else have you got on your radar that you would love to kind of have another look at? What can we?
Well, I guess my biggest focus right now, and that's where I still see the opportunity and the driver for me, certainly in the short term, but even industry is probably two things: is why create information if we're not able to use it? So this whole idea of you'll get, a tier one, or like, regardless, you'll get a design and then you'll get models that come from a design that aren't actually fit for purpose. So that's something we're trying to change on BTA. So we're actually working with our design partners, ESP and Arcadis, to actually develop a fit for purpose model that we can take straight into construction or straight through into fabrication. That's been a big sell, and a big, what is probably perceived as a risk, but to me, it's actually mitigating the risk. It's about actually making sure that you are doing the due diligence of checking and validating the information that's being produced, so it is fit for purpose, and you do that collectively as an alliance, and we end up with a better outcome. We save time, we reduce risk, we improve quality. So I think that's certainly one big focus. So we've not got rid of drawings as an industry, but we're taking that step on BTA to try and eradicate the importance of drawing. We've got a contractual deliverable that says we have to produce drawings, but so we have one of my mantras has always been model first, draw second, and that's fully embedded in the alliance and the way that we're delivering. And the focus is on the model and what goes out to site, and the drawings are there. And if the two don't match, the packages are stopped. But it's the model that drives the conversation, regardless of whether we're told that the drawings are correct. If the model's wrong, the package doesn't go out. I still think that's a massive. We've got to get away from the fact that you need drawings. It's not a new conversation, and there's all manner of arguments around how you can't put general notes into a model and etc. and all that kind of thing. But I think those are just excuses as to why there's a reluctance to challenge it. And I think if you take small steps, you can move towards it. So that's certainly one thing that we're trying to focus on. Thus far, we're being successful in that. Still got a few years to go in terms of construction of the project, but we're tracking on in terms of what we said we were going to do 2 years ago. We're actually delivering on it. Go on, sorry, Michael.
I was just going to say, is a lot of people might be wondering, is an alliance the kind of
the right
enabler
format?
like an enabler for working together better as a team? Because I mean, my first question to you, being on the the contractor head contractor kind of side, is how do you bring along your consultants to be doing this? Changing their deliverables and working for a better outcome without changing a whole world of contracts and stuff like that.
Well, it's a good question, a great question. Like the alliance model obviously benefits that and supports that much more than a D&C environment, obviously. And again, this is a major infrastructure project, which is a very different kettle of fish in terms of quantum and size of fee, etc. But with it being an alliance, we've sold, we've put the digital strategy together through the bid on how we wanted to differentiate ourselves, and that was a part of that strategy. So it wasn't just a case of me going in and saying, right, we're going to do this. We took a lot of nurturing and holding of hands and a bit of reluctance overcoming in terms of even getting designers to acknowledge that this is what we're asking of them. And even now, we're still having those same conversations, even though we signed off on this as a concept 2 years ago. You still get new people coming to the project and they're like, what? You mean we're setting out from these models? It's like, yep, that's what we're doing. So the model has definitely helped because everyone's bought into the same outcome. Commercially, it's in everyone's best interest that BTA and the project is a success. Whereas if you're in a D&C environment, that's a very different argument. And I guess a contractor talking to a designer in that type of environment, for me, it's more around the opportunity that design, in my mind, don't see. That this is my view. I'm not saying that I'm the expert in this, but the opportunity to actually go back to doing things properly is there, and most contractors would actually welcome that. The view is that they don't, and the reason the view's there is because it's often associated with a significant increase in fee, which they feel they can get elsewhere with the lesser money, or it's designers not being willing to stand by the design from a perspective of it's fit for purpose. But the opportunity is definitely there. I think if you went and talked to any tier 1, tier 2 contractors and said, we'll develop you a design that you can go and build from, and we'll stand by it, I'd be very surprised if there's many contractors, unless it was a specific process that they had a supply chain for that would affect that. There's not many would turn that down, I don't believe, in my mind. Certainly from my experience.
And then on the other side of that coin, that the subcontractors are coming on board hoping to make changes to validate, their own level of expertise. And also, that's how they also make money, is by variations of the design. So they're actually, I guess, motivated to find all the faults and make changes themselves. So
absolutely,
it's a challenging area the industry finds itself in.
Yeah, it's cultural and a legacy. Like there's the old I might say this, but you've kind of got the friends, the mates of mates element to it as well, right? Particularly in the construction world. So yeah, there's a lot of fat built into the process, through the process, that you could basically cut out by getting that design bit done properly and done correctly. That doesn't mean you still can't optioneer or value engineer the design, because as a contractor you can. We're doing that, and we've done that on BTA as well, right? So we've still got that permanent design that's being progressed. We still look at opportunities around different constructability, do a proper value for money scenario testing of that, and if it proves that that's a better route, then you make the decision and you pivot the design. Yeah, look, I still think that's a huge opportunity, both for industry but also from a design perspective. And then the last one, that was the 2 points I was going to make. That was firstly around just changing the focus on the quality of what's delivered.
It's a fork in the system, and it doesn't make its way back.
It's it's just, again, it's quality, right? It's a means to an end to provide quick and easy ways to somebody to do a task that actually devalues the whole process. So yes, it gets a piece of work off somebody's desk. They tick their box, but it means everybody else has to tick 4 other boxes to make sure that it actually is usable. So if you think of it as one whole process from start to finish, you actually need to work collaboratively and connected in a logical fashion for it to really become a valuable piece of teamwork. And that whole PDF approach and markup just doesn't provide any value beyond the person that's done what they were using it for. And I could wax lyrical for hours about example after example where I could demonstrate that that's the case.
Well, it's a legacy way of communicating information. And so I guess the other question is, what do you think data looks like in the future? Like what is...
Well, so the other point I was going to make is around transformation. So the other big part that we're focusing on is with digital and systems is it's not about the dark room full of experts that know how to use the tools. It's about how do they show up for the. I think at some point we'll have almost 900 people on this project. How do these tools transform the way they deliver? And I think that's the challenge with this whole space, right? A lot of the impact is very limited when you look at it across the holistic project, and that's certainly something we've tried to target as part of the strategy on this project. Is can we come up with systems and tools that are easy for people to pick up and are actually beneficial to the broader user than just being an expert level. So using it as web-based, so you lower the barrier to adoption. If it's people know how to use the internet, it's just embedded in them these days, right? So give somebody a link, they'll go on and click it without any effort. If you tell them they've got to go and download this piece of software and they don't have a license for that piece of software, and before you know it, you've lost them. So that's kind of one of those simple sort of changes that we're trying to make. So that's not necessarily data specific, but that's how you bring people into that environment of what is data and how do you create data. Another example is, take that PDF markup tool. It's like, yes, you can download an image from Metro Map and draw a polygon on that image, and there you've done your site plan. But that's it stops there. Yes, you can send that PDF to somebody, but it isn't very usable. So it's around engaging with them and saying, look, we can give you that Metro Map in a GIS application. Here's a tool in GIS where you can go and draw that polygon the same as you do in your tool of choice. But when you hit that other button, it gets sent straight down the line into an FME process, which converts it into a work lot boundary, which allows us to then start sectioning the model and add data to it around what work lot that is and things like that. So it's about continuity of data as well, which is, I think, the more important part for me. I think a lot of people only ever think about that blinkered approach of what do I need from this, not what can you provide to other people by doing it slightly differently. So like data in general, for me, is pretty quite simple. Try not to overly complicate it. Making sure you've got the right approach to being able to filter and I guess pass your project data into the right buckets is kind of the first fundamental one to get right. Work breakdown structures is a term that's often used in construction that generally doesn't provide you what you need to from a data perspective. It'll do it from a cost perspective and a procurement perspective, but it never generally goes far enough down to get it to the granular level of, say, for example, fabrication data. So that's the first thing we try to do, is provide that. Yes, WBS is great, but we actually need to think more broadly than that and get right down to expanding that to the right level. So you've got that one ability to filter. And then it's really just the other key part is around connectivity. So how do you take an element in design and actually track it through its life cycle? And thinking of it in a format that, again, you can provide to a designer to say, we need you to do this in your model. I acknowledge that might be seen as an impact, but you give it to them in a way that it's probably the least effort for them. So, you try and come up with ways of creating unique IDs that are concatenations of data they would normally use. So you kind of get a unique ID, but you're not actually specifically asking them to go back and retrofit information. So those are the two principles that we've applied on BTA. It's the ability to track each object uniquely, so you can life cycle that. And then it's really around how do you then filter that information in multiple ways. So whether that's through asset classification, whether it's through another type of classification, such as Uniclass or something, or it's specific information that we want to know about an object. So one of the things we've challenged design on this is to say, right, we're building a model that needs to be accurate, but how do you validate that it's accurate? So we've gone quite hard to say, you need to tell me, and this is, I don't know, I'd be interested to hear your views as an architect. The one thing that always used to frustrate me as a structural technician was an architect would send me an architectural model with 3 design options in it. in Revit, and I have no idea which design option I'm supposed to be looking at. It was always on the structural guide to figure out what you'd actually been sent.
They
And
were
so
all right. They were all good ideas.
Oh, they
I
probably,
know.
yes, they were all the cheapest option.
The one with the more glass and less structural elements visible.
Yeah, look, it's you always got more than you bargained for, right? But that idea of the author should tell the receiver what they need to know. You shouldn't have an expectation on the receiver of the information to have to figure something out. So if you're giving me a structural element, a beam, for example, you should be able to tell me quite certain with an absolute degree of certainty what the profile is, what the material is, and what length it is and where it is in space, right? That's all I'm asking. So if you can't tell me those 4 or 5 things, then we've kind of got a problem. And if you just break it down to that's all we really need, it kind of goes back to those 2 things of, I'm not asking for millions and zillions of bits of data. I just need you to tell me what it is you're giving me as a design and give me enough information to say that I can validate through a means of extracting that geometry and that data and comparing those 2 things to say, yeah, those 2 things are equal, right? You're telling me it's a 600 by 400 beam and the geometry equates that it's a 600 by 400 beam.
This is something that you were mentioning earlier in the conversation. It's this idea of an RFI is that it's someone down the track who's asking a question, up channel, like, I haven't got enough here. You need to tell me more. I can't figure this out. And it's usually because there is a lack of information. And that's what you're saying is these designers should be back on there to get this fit for purpose in the beginning so that our whole RFI chain doesn't need to happen as much as what it does happen now.
Yeah, 100%. And steel model or steel structural model is a good example. Steel detailers have always been nervous of using structural models for the reasons we've kind of discussed. Like, do they trust the data? Is the geometry accurate? But for them to go and reinterpret a design that a design team's just spent 18 months in designing, why would you do that? Why would you expect somebody that's never seen the job sit and reinterpret? Like, one argument is, they're checking that what the designers have done is right, or they're adding their own expertise to it, but they can add their expertise to it without actually having to go and check and reinterpret information a whole team have spent 18 months developing. But I guess that fundamentally goes against my grain of, like, as an engineering and design team, that's not what you set out to achieve, is to produce something that basically gets thrown in the bin. It's about how do you get it to a point where it can be used, and it shouldn't be seen as a risk. Yeah, look, the RFI is a classic. You got 3 months of RFIs on it. Every steel package just doesn't need to be there.
Yeah. I kind of would like to know, you're at the very top end, very big projects. Someone like a tier 2 builder, someone who's a bit further on, maybe listening to this, and they're going to take something away. What does it look like for them? How would you encourage them to be exploring new technology, changing some workflows? Like, what is it that they should be looking at first, or maybe in the very near future, to improve their workflows?
Yeah, good question. I always use the analogy when, again, we talked earlier about the narrative hasn't really changed, and that's a good example of. I used to get that with Arrow, right? You do this on a marina bay sands, but you wouldn't do it on a canopy type scenario, and I've always pushed back against that. The principle and the value is the same regardless. It's more making sure that you're set up in a way that how you apply that same process at both scale and large scale and small scale. And so if I'm going to use the canopy example to develop a parametric script for a small canopy, is this, for me, is a very simple task compared to a complex route where you've got to look at multiple iterations. But the value of being able to do it through a script is the same. Well, you've got the ability to use that script to do different things with it, whether it be push it through from a design model into a fabrication model, whether it's take the data out and use it for carbon indexing, those kind of things. So it's the principle's the same. The scale piece for me doesn't. You can get into the technology and the tools at quite a reasonable entry price level, right? It's not like you've got to wait for that $1 billion job to be able to pay for the software. There's a lot of capable platforms out there. There's a lot of open source stuff there now that, you look at the stuff like Blender that's sort of come about over the last few years. It's all FOC, right? It's more about acknowledging that there is a better way to do something. Necessarily because we've always done it that way doesn't mean it's the right way. And that's, I talked about that earlier, like constantly challenging yourself. I think that's what a tier 2 should be thinking about, is like, how do you challenge yourself in order to be able to sort of do something differently? There are good examples of that in industry where, you kind of had those tier 2s that have looked at doing things differently. Hickory sort of spring to mind as one good example of how they'd re-looked at doing vertical high-rise buildings using technology, and it certainly paid off for them. So it's quite a straightforward answer for me. It's not a case of if, it's like you just get on with it. I think it's something you should debate, to be honest.
Challenge yourself, look at what you're doing, and find all the weak points in that. That's really good. We have this quick fire round. So as we kind of wrap up, we got this quick fire round, kind of some random questions, but I've got, so one of them is I've got to pick a tool, and they're tools to, I guess, fix your work, fix your thing. You've got a choice of a hammer, screwdriver, and a duct tape. So I think, this duct tape is like the quick fix, and your hammer is very permanent. A screw you can kind of finesse, I guess. What's your tool of choice there?
I'm very much the duct tape guy. So again, it's not about perfecting the scenario, right? So you can spend months trying to perfect the process and get it working to the perfect, but that's often not what you need. In fact, I'd say it's very rarely what you need. And I'll give you an example of what I mean there. Like, my level of coding is, you guys are speaking to the wrong people here, but my level of coding is not being able to learn to code it from the ground up. So I've produced this perfectly bespoke system. It's kind of like, well, if I take that little piece of code from that and I use that function in that product and I join those three things together, that'll do what I need. And it enables me to deliver the job. And the reality is that certainly when you're not just developing software, which is obviously a different thing, when you're just delivering projects, getting the job done and getting the job done right is the most important part. So I'd go.
It's fit for purpose, and duct tape solves a lot of purposes.
If it holds it together long enough, yeah, why not?
And the next silly question we have is concrete, steel, or timber?
It's not silly to a structural engineer. So that's a very serious question.
Oh, that's not a catch question. I'd say steel. You could go into the sustainability element of it, but complex steel structures are definitely the most interesting and challenging to work on.
Yeah. And favorite piece of hardware tech at the moment?
I actually don't really have one, to be honest. I've just bought a new Logitech mouse, which is the quietest mouse I've ever had. That's probably about. It gets comments for the fact that you can't hear it being clicked, but that's about the only new piece of tech that I've had in the last.
That's good. 2
or 3 years. The gimmicks are not flying at the moment. It's still hardcore stuff of just getting the job done.
Yeah. I think we're in the trough of disillusionment for a lot of the fancy tech over the last five years. In there, with the VR headset,
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, exactly. Been there, done it. But that definitely falls into the gimmick bucket quite quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
Even an iPad. It's like iPads. They're great for the little one to watch YouTube on, but not that practical for delivering a construction project.
Here, sit down and watch Bluey.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's the only way I can keep him
Chris,
quiet.
yes. Well, does its job. Chris, I want to thank you so much for your time sharing with us. You've shared a lot of insight and wisdom along the way. You've done a lot, and bringing your story, sharing your story with us, as I'm sure it's going to motivate a lot of people to challenge themselves and find out what they can do to improve. How data flows on projects and all of that sort of stuff. I think it's been really good being able to talk to you today.
No, thanks for listening. It's been a pleasure talking to you both as well. Hopefully, it was not the too grumpy version or the pessimistic version. I tried to be as upbeat as I possibly can. If those of you know me.
No,
That's
you
good,
know
mate.
what?
Very good.
I worked on the Adelaide Oval project and worked with John,
Yeah,
Chris Mawson,
Yeah.
a lot of the guys from Arup, and it's a very complex steel structure, and I was exposed to a lot of kind of your legacy when this is back in 2012-ish, 2011, something.
Yeah,
like that.
2010 Adelaide Oval, wasn't it? I think I was doing sports at the time. I was still in Singapore back then. Yeah, it was one I didn't work on. Yeah, no, it was another one of those good projects that they churned out back in the day. Still the right way to do it.
Yeah,
but it's with the current project too, mate. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be another.
Yeah, no, thank you. Look, it's a beast, and we've got a lot going forward. But as I said, the most positive thing for me at the moment is we're doing what we said we would do 2 years ago, which is something I'm really proud of right now. Still got a long way to go. I feel like 2.5 years in, we've still got 4 years to go. So we're not even halfway, but definitely on the right track. So
Awesome.
that's that.
Thank you, mate.